Water Quality Management Committee, Thursday, April 7th, 3:30. The first item on the agenda is Little Pond Shellfish Demonstration Year 3 Monitoring Report, discussion and vote. We have with us today Dr. Brian Howes, who's the head of SMAST, whose outfit has been doing this for us for the 3 years, and here is our 3 years. And welcome.
Matt, could you turn off a couple lights just so the slides show on better?
Yeah, they probably will switch this up later.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
There is a direct feed. That's great.
That's good.
Well, it's always nice to see you guys. This is as long or short, it's up to you, because as you'll see very quickly that it's just the questions that are going to be the most of the time. If you have a lot of questions, if you want to get out of here. Thanks, kidding.
Right.
So, anyway.
Come in.
Yeah. It's just so noisy in the hall.
Oh, no, thank you.
So, as Eric said, this is really the report on the year 3 monitoring, but as you'll see, you can't do that. You sort of have to talk about 1 and 2 as well. But its mainly focuses on year 3. And we have upped our staff and everything. Now we're doing a lot of oyster work around and other shellfish work on Cape Cod and on Martha's Vineyard. And actually now we have a series of PhD students as well working on this. And I would say that in many ways it owes to you guys because you got started already at that level.
Can you use a microphone?
Yeah.
That was
That
not
doesn't
working.
work?
Or is it on?
Maybe it's not on?
I'll just use this one.
Okay.
Sure, whatever.
Fine. That's going to look great on camera, isn't it? What is that thing in front of him? So, anyway, and so we have some senior staff, but also Misha Labrie. A lot of this work is part of our dissertation work now. But we don't send graduate students out to do things. She was with Dave Schlesinger and Roland. We're in the field. Dave is our technology guy, so he was out diving and doing stuff with her. And also we've gotten a lot of help from Sia, who I'm sort of pinch hitting for today. And so I wanted to acknowledge her efforts. Okay, she's been our major point of contact for the town and did a lot of the logistics that we needed with the aquaculture stuff. Well, the goals of the project haven't changed really from the beginning. The real concept was to deploy a quantity of oysters, uncertain, 500,000, 1.5 million, sort of in that range. It ended up heading towards 2 million at one point, we thought. But we needed to get enough in there to try to see if we could get a measurable change in water quality. In other words, we had to be able to detect it. So this is not just to see if you can grow oysters, this is also to get the effect. And so therefore we want to design an experiment that we could get the effect. And then we monitor the associated water quality. Each year, oysters would typically go in around late spring, and then they'd be pulled out in October was the general plan. It didn't always happen, as you'll see. And then we wanted to look at nitrogen cycling. We specifically wanted to, in the first 2 years, not in year 3, so you're not going to see any of that stuff for year 3, but we wanted to get at the amount of nitrogen removal by oysters in toto. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but not very much, since that was mainly year 1 and year 2 piece, but just to remind you. And then, then we also had these other goals that as part of being able to do this project, the town had to get permit or agreement from the Town's Conservation Commission, so we had to do certain measurements for that, and I'll talk a little bit about that because it's important. And we're also going to meet with the Concom on the 27th. If this is approved today, in other words, this is okay with you guys, or you want to change this, we'll change it, but then it goes to them on the 27th. And then, we're always doing the public acceptance part. That's a critical piece of everything that you guys have been doing, so I don't have to tell you. And then we also wanted to look at some of the ability to do this in general, which I'm not going to talk about that today. That's her bailiwick. All right, so the reality of this is now towns are really going crazy on in a good way, on looking at shellfish culture, and it is mainly oysters, although they're starting to look at mercenaria as well and mixed species cultures, but so far it's been mainly oysters. An in-estuary method for removing nitrogen to reduce eutrophication. As you can see in the lower third bullet, Mashpee's doing it, Falmouth has been doing it, Barnstable is doing it, Wellfleet's doing it, Orleans has got programs going, Harwich, Dennis. These are things in implementation, and there's more, but they're in different stages. Wareham's going to start up maybe this summer, Westport, it goes on. And it's just, I can name 5 more.
Westport's going to do it?
Yeah, I think Westport's going to do it, yeah. Well, we're hoping. And the Vineyard's starting it up. So it's a good thing, and I don't know, though, the problem is people are rushing out to do it, and we still are stuck on bullet 2, which is getting better estimates on how much you really get out in harvest, and just listening to you guys, educated people, talk about nitrogen removal by oysters and what's a real number. The critical thing is that people have looked at the harvest number, and you would think it would be easy to get that number, but it's not. We've started looking at the harvest numbers again, measuring, getting our own measurements and trying to get some algorithms going so you don't always have to measure everything all the time. And it ends up that right now it's a mess. It depends on where they were grown, how long they were in, and you're thinking about the shell harvest. It's how thick is this shell? Is it a fast growing site that they pulled? Shells are thin, not much nitrogen. They're longer growing, they're fat, they're thick, they have dirt in them, they're still pulled out. And so the number's threefold easy. I think you were mentioning 5 maybe or something like that, but I don't disagree with that. It could be 10 for all we know, right? And so we'll have those numbers coming along very shortly, probably by fall.
So,
We already started
Brian,
doing
what you're saying is the amount of nitrogen that they take out is all over the place.
Yeah, and it's probably bigger than what we thought. Now, we tend to be very conservative when we're doing projections, so we use relatively low numbers. And I think that we were using very low numbers for shell removal, and now the nitrogen shell removal is coming up to sort of be equal to the meat removal, which is where it all was. And so that sort of surprised us, and we're checking that. And, after we get a couple more hundred assay, we'll feel good. Because you have to go to different estuaries. You can't just do one estuary. You go to different estuaries, different size, different shell thickness. All those variables have to go in if you're going to get up there and say, this is what we think it is. And give you guys something useful that you can use, because you don't want to have to go measure it. Well, if it's this big and it's that thick, okay, and it weighs this much, okay, that's pretty much going to be in this range. That's what we're trying to do. On the enhancement of denitrification, we were able to find that in the first couple of years, and we've been doing a lot of that work. As I said, we're spread around now. We've gotten some additional denitrification money for 3 bays now, and what has happened is that we are finding, an easy rule of thumb now is you're going to get at least a doubling of your harvest. So if you get out 1 kilo by harvest, you're probably going to get out at least another kilo by sediment. And remember, I'm super cautious in my numbers. I try to really lowball them until I can prove it with numbers for you guys. And when I can do that, I will be in front of you, showing you the numbers, giving you the numbers, and letting you chew them over yourself, okay?
You say you're going to remove a kilo with verjuice and a kilo by sediment?
Yeah. So, because we're getting this big stimulatory effect in some cases, but it depends. It depends if they're put on in bags or in racks or bottom deployment, meaning just laid out single layer on the bottom. We haven't looked at reefs too much because they just aren't around here. I tried to build one in Wellfleet, it's gone now. It died, got wiped out. So it's a problem. Someday we'll get to that, but right now we're trying to give the towns data on what they're actually doing rather than something that they haven't been able to really do. Okay?
So is that 2 million oysters? Is removing a kilo?
No, I was just saying, if you remove 1 kilo this way, you get this other kilo. If you remove 100, then it's another 100. If it's 1,000, it's another. I'm just saying it's equal.
So you'll get into the specifics of Little Pond later.
I've already done the denitrification on Little Pond, and this isn't a talk on nitrogen removal, as you'll see for 2015. This is the nitrogen removal piece is not actually part of what we're doing, although we will have those data. I mean, we have the, but it's one pond. The problem with Little Pond is the oysters go in as seed. They come out when they're in October, when they're 1.5 inches or so. And that's just not enough to really determine what the real effect of 1 million oysters is. But the beautiful thing about Little Pond is it was set up in a way you could measure things, and we learned about the size changes in filtration rates with size, and the deposition changes with size, all of those things. So now what we've learned out of this is really guiding how other people should do it. It's really was valuable. Even though we didn't, ideally you'd have some out there that were 3.5 inches and you'd leave them and then 3 inches and have a different year classes, say 3 different year classes out there all the time and you harvest the oldest ones and then you put a new one in. So you could rotate that through. That's how it's done. That's how it's done in West Bay. And you'd rotate those through so you'd always know the biomass out there. You'd always know what your removal was, even though you were pulling some out every year. Okay? Makes sense?
So, just one thing, Eric, just want to be clear. When you say 1 kilogram of nitrogen would go into growth, and then 1 kilogram would be removed by denitrification, or at least 1 kilogram, that's because of the aquaculture.
Oh, yeah, that would be the amount attributed to I use this term oyster effect. It's just the integrated effect of having oysters there. If you took the oysters away, it would be 1 kilogram less. Whatever it is, it gets enhanced by another kilogram by oysters, and you harvest them, then you get 1 kilogram.
And are you talking about 1 kilogram of oysters at harvestable size?
I'm just saying, it would be,
Nitrogen.
it's the amount, 1 kilogram of nitrogen, and no, it's not at we didn't do our measurements at harvestable size, but we have the harvest numbers from harvestable size, and middle size, and little ones.
So that's not what you're reporting today, but your sense of the work that you've been doing so far would indicate that there was this 1-to-1 ratio.
And what we gave you in our previous year's
In the
technical
previous-
memos.
right, because you
So you
didn't-
did get that.
You did not look at denitrification.
It was not part of this
In
year's.
2015. Okay.
Okay. But I wanted to, come on, we've been doing this together a long time. I wanted to let you know the other things were fine.
Sure, no,
Right.
come, keep going. Yeah.
I enjoy coming here. All right, so this is sort of, though, how we're seeing, how we view it and how you really view the nitrogen removal. We see the phytoplankton going in to the left at the top, and your suspended bags is what that's supposed to represent. And so that the main effect that you see is effect on the phytoplankton density in the water column, and also particulate carbon and nitrogen in the water column, which can either be in phytoplankton or can be dead phytoplankton or can be resuspended organic matter. But for the most part, what the oysters want is the phytoplankton. They create these organic biodeposits, and we've been able to measure those directly in Little Pond as well. So we have good records on those. The rule of thumb is that basically if you take out if they grow with a gram of nitrogen into an oyster, it's probably excreting 10 grams of nitrogen, and it's probably just false depositing 100 grams of nitrogen out of the bottom. So the multiplier, there's a huge amount of biodeposit compared to the amount that's processed through the oyster itself. Because there's both feces, but there's pseudofeces, which are most of what they deposit, which means it's stuff they suck out of the water, they go, bleh, I don't want that, and they cast it, and it falls to the bottom as a biodeposit. But there's a lot of good stuff in there for geochemistry. And so what happens, that gets mineralized in the sediment, so the oxygen consumption of the sediments goes up, get a lot more mineralization going on, get ammonia released during that mineralization, which is what happens normally. If there's no oysters, there's still phytoplankton falling on the bottom. This is all happening. And then we get some oxidation of that ammonia to nitrite, and then nitrate, and some of that gets out to the water column. We measured that, but a lot of it then gets denitrified and goes off as nitrogen gas. And we have measured, that's what we measured directly. And there's multiple forms of denitrification, and the way that we have measured denitrification captures all of the methods, even the newly formed Animox method, which still ends up with an N2N product, okay? So we don't miss it. And it's a sort of the cheapest way, easiest way to get a lot of data on the only thing you want, which is the amount of denitrification without getting into the process stuff. You guys don't want to pay for process stuff. You want that number.
Sure. Steve.
So you need a certain amount of anoxic sediments for the denitrification to take place?
Yeah, denitrification takes place in very low to no oxygen environments, but the world's coastal sediments pretty much are all anoxic or hypoxic below the surface, a couple millimeters, 6, 7 millimeters.
So a parallel project that this committee discussed last month, which intends to oxygenate the sediment, will that be detrimental to this? Or will you still have enough of an anoxic layer below that?
Oh, you'll have enough of an anoxic layer below that. The one thing that you get, if the sediments are really soupy sulfitic now, you may get increased nitrification, which means you might actually stimulate denitrification in those environments. The problem with those is actually getting the oxygen it's not that there's not enough oxygen in the world, it's where it's located versus where the sediments are, and how do you get those two in contact with each other? That's a problem. Okay? The one thing we haven't looked at, we look at the removal by the shells and by the meat, we look at the removal into the sediments and deposition, and we look at the denitrification, but we haven't looked at nitrogen burial. It's usually a very small number, but if we ever did a real one, like if you had a full-fledged thing really going in with large oysters, it's worth it, where we might be able to pick up a burial signal, we could easily do that. You know, that's something we could do. It's just not worth it at this point, because it's generally a very small number. This is permanent burial, yeah.
Do you have any estimates on carbon, through restoration, carbon release as
Yep.
well? In other words, reduction of the biomass
Mhm.
on the bottom, the benthic biomass, through, if aquaculture adds.
No, if anything, I would say that aquaculture in this case probably increases the amount of sediment material, organic material in the sediment. Doesn't mean it's active, but because it's reworked and reworked and reworked. But, you know, you're getting a lot of chaff down there that will build up. And some of that will have nitrogen in it over time. And that would be permanent burial. But when it's permanently buried, it's not doing anything. It's like coal would be permanent burial, you know. So that's not an issue here. But for completeness, I can't help myself. So what we get here then is you get the oysters in, and then you harvest them, and we measure that. That's what everybody measures. And then what you guys have is you actually have some initial estimates of denitrification loss, but not of nitrogen burial. We can make some estimates because of the way we did our measurements, but they're not very good. We did measure it, but it's not very good. All right. So you're already familiar with these, little pond aerial on the left, and the green patch on the right is where the oysters are deployed during the late spring to early fall. The small box in the bottom right on the right hand is where, if there's an emergency, they are moved to there. Like what would be an emergency? Well, an emergency would be like an anoxic event, and they're starting to die, and they need to be moved to someplace better, or a hurricane or whatever. So this was the triangles on the left hand with the white boxes next to them are all water quality stations where we take surface bottom measurements of water quality at biweekly intervals for most of the summer, and then we do an extra one, I think, in December, an extra one in April, I think it is, for Concom, as you'll see. The blue dots are oxygen moorings that we had. They're the two that are in the gray box you see there next to the arrow that is supposed to point to the gray box, that is where the oysters are. One was at the bottom, one was in the oyster patch. And the reason that the one in the oyster patch was there was not so much as to look at the effect of oysters, but to see if the oxygen conditions were enough to sustain the oyster population without them suffocating and dying because of low oxygen. And that was proved to be very important each year, actually, because we did have some deaths each year from anoxia. All right. The other part of it is that we're doing is that really what we're doing is trying to get the data to meet the regulatory needs of Mass DEP so that you can use this type of tool for lowering nitrogen for TMDL compliance. Because you do all the work you want, but if you can't prove it to them, then it doesn't count. So that's what you guys are doing, and you've been out front on that. We were asked early on if grab sampling, which just means you go out and capture water and analyze it, as opposed to putting in a sensor that records continuously, you know, if that was okay. And yeah, that's consistent with how all the TMDL data was collected. So yeah, it is consistent. It's fine. And then, because this talk is also going to be given to Concom, they wanted to know, you know. So, and then we also have a quality assurance plan for all of the assays and everything. It's been signed off by EPA and DEP. And then when it comes down to conservation, we put in the in situ sensors with every 15-minute resolution. That helped them with some of their concerns about oxygen. They wanted the effect on benthic animals communities in the pond, so we measured benthic animal communities. And they wanted the expanded temporal sampling to go, not end in October, but to go in December and then in April. And then again, it starts up in May. Okay, so that's...
I have a question about 2015, the data. Because the oysters, 2/3 of the oysters were removed, we kind of like lost a year, right? basically, more or less, because.
Oh, you mean when you put in $1
2/3
million, you lose half, that
No,
kind of
they
thing?
were moved.
This year?
They were moved from the project site, the
This year?
experimental site, yeah, this is
Yeah, are you
last year.
trying to screw up my top?
Yeah, what?
Let me get there.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just wondering, you said something about.
I'm just
moving.
pulling your leg. Yeah, that's a problem, and you'll see the problem
Yeah, all right.
in about a
okay.
minute. Okay, lots of data, 260 samples are collected, but the critical thing is that this past year, we started April 23rd, we went through to September 22nd, we then did October 28th, and we went to December 10th, and we now are collecting the final one. It's sort of out of where we are, but we'll do it anyway and just get it in, throw it in the pot. And all those stations, there's a lot of stations, 13 stations. And we do at the right-hand side, those things that say +1 FD, those are QA samples. The data is really just used for quality assurance to make sure that, that we have defensible data. All right, so what do we find? 2015, what we found was that, that there was salinity stratification again. There's vertical stratification in the water column every year, and it's not due to temperature as much as due to salinity. We found that in each year, including the 2012 pre-oyster deployment year, but the strength of that stratification goes up and down, as you'll see. What happens, though, is, especially in strong stratification years, like 2012 and 2014, by being stratified, it's so heavily stratified in those 2 years, 2012, 2014, that any surface effects are held in that surface layer. You don't see it distributed throughout the water column. So that you get a much more intense measurement, change in that surface layer because the water's not vertically mixing and the oysters are floating in that surface layer, yeah.
What causes some years to be more stratified?
Some years to be more stratified than others?
Right.
Probably the amount of stream flow in the spring and then through the year. Because it's a salinity, I'll show you the data. So anyway, we had 2015, 2013, which both had oyster deployments. Weren't as stratified as 12 and 14. 14 had oysters and was a great year, actually, for measurement. 2012 was before the oysters went in. Here's the data on that. And what you see is that the separation of those lines, the pinkish, reddish, whatever it is the bottom. I'm sorry, it's upside down, but is the bottom, and the dark line is the surface water salinity. And so the difference between those lines is the strength of the stratification. You can see in the top two panels, there's a big difference. I mean, there are differences of 4, 5, 6 parts per thousand. That's huge. Usually we're looking at 1 or 2. And so in the bottom two, which are 13 and 15, which both had oysters in, the difference is much smaller, and it's down in the range of a couple parts per thousand throughout much of the pond. On the left-hand side of the figure is the head and where the stream enters. On the right-hand side of the figure is where the salt water from Vineyard Sound comes in, and that's why they tend to get a lot closer together as you move from the left, where the fresh water comes in, over to the right, where the tide comes in and out. Okay, that's why they collapse like that, come together near the inlet. Okay, so but without this data, we wouldn't be able to interpret most of the data, other data that we have, because we need to know it's stratified. Okay. Kept the data really short on this. The critical thing here is that the blue horizontal line is the actual bags, where the actual deployment is. And in 2015 at the bottom, if you look at the bottom two panels, which are 15, and there's effects. I mean, what you typically will see in the total nitrogen, there's a drop off going through where the oysters are, headed into the oysters, and then there's not too much going on for a while, and then there's some noise towards the inlet. All that makes sense. If you look at 2015, though, you get this sort of just gentle, smooth, there's no breaks, there's nothing, just gentle, smooth at the top, just nothing going through that horizontal blue area in the lower left-hand panel. So there's really nothing there. And then and I will tell you that we wrote the entire report doing everything we could to pull out something. So you guys would say, well, at least you tried, right? And it wasn't until we were done with all the data analysis and anything that somebody stepped in and said, the oysters were removed at the end of July.
I
And-
thought it was August.
End of August.
No, actually,
Was it July?
Yeah, it was in July.
End of July.
And so I didn't get upset about that. I said, well, this is great. It does two things. It's like a different kind of control. We did everything we could to see something, and it wasn't there, and so we wrote a report that said, it isn't there, we don't know why. Now we say, well, let's break out the time that they were there, which is the lower right-hand panel, the time when they were there and the time that they aren't there, which is the, as I said, the bottom, which is just the surface where the effect is concentrated. And what you see in the surface one is you start to then see that little decline from left to right on the first 4 or 5 dot stations in the lower right-hand panel, on the top solid line. You see nothing in the bottom line. That's what you should see, because the bottom line is after the oysters were pulled out. It's not a bottom sample, it is after the oysters were pulled out. So you look at the difference in that area, and it just says, yeah, not so much that there was a big oyster effect, but yeah, there's just not much going on in 2015, and the oysters weren't really there, and what it really says is, you know, you did a blind test on us. You really got us, okay? But it's good,
Yeah,
it's
it's a good
it's
test.
good. It's a good story,
Yeah.
because we got really good data in 13 and 14. So we're not hurt by not having this. Yeah,
Steve?
I hear what you're saying about that control, and that is nice.
Yeah.
But in 13 and 14, I don't see compelling evidence that the oysters are doing anything.
no, because
you?
well, I see it when I do the time by time points, all right? And when I look at the upstream, in the bag, downstream, for each individual sampling, and look at those, I get a compelling story that there's a drop in 70% of the dates, something like that. These are clear, it goes doink, doink, it drops each time. But the problem is with these are averages and they go over the whole thing. What I get out of this that is compelling is there wasn't anything in 2015.
Okay, I just, the two upper curves.
Well, the two upper curves, if you look at the right-hand upper one,
Because on the left-hand one,
or
you have to
left-hand one.
explain why it goes up just before the oysters. And in the right-hand one,
we had a
half
bloom.
the time it's coming down, half the time it's going up in the oyster region.
We had a bloom.
I'm not sure why you would expect a localized effect anyway.
Well, we did. What we actually also did is we had turbidity data, we had POC data, we have,
I mean, wouldn't it just get mixed out?
what's happening is that you have to measure, you're measuring when the tide is going one way. And so you're always standing downstream of the oysters, and you're collecting water that's passing through them, and then you're getting closer and closer and closer to them. Then you get into the patch, and then you go above them, but it's always going this way. So your effect is behind you all the time. It's going that way. You know, it's like standing in a stream and you muddy it up, mud goes that way. And you're getting stuff passing through. So there's no, and the mixing is not sufficient to mix away the whole effect. And that is why we did see in 13 and 14 with our continuous monitoring turbidity meters that it was a less light extinction. But it's a small effect. These are not huge effects. These are little oysters. These are not huge oysters. But yeah, I don't see a quote unquote, I do see an effect. The problem is part of it's squeezed. But if you really look carefully, you'll see that the up gradient one is typically higher than the down gradient one from the bags, or the one at the head of the raft. Remember, water's only going left to right. There is no right to left. And you can say, well, why did it go up there? Well, because there was a bloom at that point. And in fact, we saw other blooms pop around the pond. And we actually even saw, we were worried about the oysters causing blooms as well. Okay? But you can't just look at the TN, you have to look at the chlorophyll, you have to look at each of the individual assays, which I did not want to do to you today. One of the most compelling things for the oysters are consuming things is the fact that there's a monster phaeophyton pop right in the oyster patch, because what are they doing? They're converting the chlorophyll to phaeophyton. That's what they do in their digestive processes. We're seeing a POC drop, we see a PON drop. The problem with TN is that includes DON, and DON they don't do much with. And so you get, and that's 80% or so of the nitrogen pool. So you get this big background that isn't going to change, and then you're trying to measure this 20% change on it, of which nitrate doesn't change. Ammonia changes, but it goes up, and PON goes down, and so you're trying to find this very small effect. I only put in TN because that's what the TMDL does. But each component is in the tech report individually. And that's where you'll start to see. We took it, what is it called in law? It's the weight of the evidence. It's the weight of all the evidence is what we came up with in effect. It's not a big effect, ever. The biggest effect we had was in the sediments because they don't move. And so the sediments, the stuff rains on the sediments from day one to they're out. And so that sediment effect can build up over time. Not forever, it has a time course to it too, but that can increase and increase over time. The water column effect can't build up because the water's going away. Right? So the best place to look is in the sediments. But what people want to see is clearer water, and I don't have any problem that we had clearer water. Right.
In the immediate vicinity?
Hmm?
In the immediate vicinity of,
Yeah, oh yeah, and it's not, you see, the killer is, that's a graph of the whole pond, and as you can see, the pond is doing all sorts of stuff. And there's blooms, there's a bloom in the upper pond in 2013, and then later in the lower pond. And you notice that there's a big difference between top and bottom. Those are nitrogen levels, not salinity. So the stratification is stratifying the nitrogen as well. And we're not getting mixing of the nitrogen. That's why you see things in the surface, not in the bottom. So what happens in 13, you asked why the salinity was different. I'll tell you why the chlorophyll was different. We had a buildup of plankton in the surface in 2013. We did not get the same buildup in 14, which was a strong stratification. 13 they all had stratification. And we did also see a buildup of phytoplankton in the surface in 15. And in fact, this was one of the times we were worried that the oysters might be assisting the bloom. And what you can see is, if you look at the right-hand one, the solid line, you'll see that actually that's when the oysters were there, and it's a flat line right through the patch. There is no effect on chlorophyll at all. And that's when the oysters were there. Nothing. Yeah.
If I could ask one thing, I was just wondering, this is all with oysters, right, all of these?
The bottom two don't necessarily, the right-hand bottom one has oysters separated from non-oysters in 15. The left-hand one was if you just treat it the same time period, August of October, but that means a portion of that time did not have oysters. In the top ones, they had oysters the whole time.
Okay, the reason I asked that is that the research I've done that looks at blooms of plankton is that you can oftentimes get with a steady nutrient inflow, a bloom, and then a collapse.
Yeah.
A bloom and a collapse, a bloom and a collapse. Now, if you have the oysters filtering things out, you may get that may be muted. And it might be that they actually do keep the plankton or the phytoplankton at a higher level because you don't get this massive collapse that would happen, through this process. And that's the problem in our ponds, because that's what the water quality just collapses.
If we had enough large ones,
Yeah.
and you were rotating it and using oysters for management and also, for growing oysters, and so you were rotating them through to maintain a certain biomass there all the time, that might work. The problem with this is that we're trying to pull, August the oyster is still very small, maybe an inch, and so we're trying to pull out with small oysters. If anything about this project wasn't good, it wasn't his fault, but it was in year 3. This year, we were supposed to have access to larger oysters that had been, transferred for growth. But that didn't happen because those transfers didn't work as good as they should have. It wasn't his fault, just the oysters weren't there to study. So that was a problem. We never really, for Falmouth, got to look at what we really want to look at was the bigger biomass situation. So.
Yeah, we have to keep that in mind, that these oysters had to be pulled out when they were 1.5 to 2 inches.
Yeah.
And we know that the greater effect comes when they're growing up to their commercial size.
Right.
I just want to point out, before you meet with the Concom, your last line says, due to removal of oysters,
Oh, yeah, I
August
can.
28th. So we need to.
I didn't know that, I'll fix that.
Yeah.
We need to make sure we get that date right.
Sure.
Actually, the oysters probably didn't have to be moved because they moved about 2/3 of them, and they left a third to half there.
Yes.
And the survival was equivalent.
Yeah.
So oysters have the capacity under low oxygen conditions to change their metabolism,
Yeah, no,
and thereby their oxygen consumption drops, and they can weather a tough period. And this was just a couple of days, but.
Yeah,
the
but,
experiment
you know,
showed it, yeah,
you see,
it just happened.
I've been doing field work for 40 years, and I
Right.
guess my bottom line is, it happened, and we'll get something out of it.
Why did they have to be moved?
Low oxygen conditions. Here, I'll show you,
So we can't use that just as
right here.
an excuse to say, we can't just say, otherwise it's fine, because that's part of real life.
Actually, this
In
says
future
required
years
removal of
in
the
which
oysters
you
August
might
28th.
implement this,
That's
there would
true.
be years when
Yeah.
you had to move them,
Have
and
to.
then you wouldn't get the effect.
Right, John?
No,
So-
but
John.
you don't have to remove big oysters, you have to remove small oysters.
So it seems to me the take-home from this three-year experiment is that we have developed a very successful way of growing the seed for our distribution
Yeah.
system. As a mechanism for removing nitrogen, the way we're doing it in Little Pond, this is not contributing in any significant way.
Nope.
Right.
So what we've got is a data set, unfortunately, for the impact of very small oysters.
Right.
And it's an incredibly hard thing to say with any certainty what they've actually been doing, just because of the size that we've had.
Well, and our situation here is that we know, we know that, and we knew going in that little ones weren't gonna do much. What we did is we tried to pull out and focus on when they got up to about a half an inch to an inch and a half.
So
But we still knew from studying those that the filtration rate just skyrockets, so that we're pulling them out right and moving them at the time when they're really gonna have the maximum effect.
So we can certainly go to the Concom and say, as part of our aquaculture strategy, taking our seed from the upwellers in the harbor, bringing them down to Little Pond, growing them up, has been a very successful strategy, and it certainly has not negatively impacted Little Pond in any way.
Right.
But it has not contributed significantly to an improvement in the water quality of Little Pond.
Absolutely. Even when they're still there and they're at their biggest, they're hardly doing much that you can really, you can show that, yeah, water gets a little clearer, you are removing everything that you should remove if they're alive, right? But it's not a big effect. But we did get enough data to be able to talk about the changes in the sediment geochemistry, and to me, that's the real yield to the town, is that you got some numbers that you can start putting in your projections for forward use.
Right, but that's not this report.
Right.
Well, yeah,
Okay,
not
just to
my
be
fault.
clear, you haven't given us a report on sedimentation, right?
On the deposition rate or on the burial? We were never gonna do burial right now. I mean, that's not part of what we're supposed to do.
Right.
No, right, agreed.
But we did do the denitrification stuff in the previous report.
Okay.
And you have that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, to the extent it gets DEP closer to being able to find a credit
Yeah,
that applies to us and the other 15 towns, this is valuable stuff.
yeah. No, I think this has also promoted other people doing it too, so it's gonna be the weight of all the other towns banging on the wall, saying, let us in, we wanna do this, that's gonna get the permits done.
Just one thing, the original plan was that we grow full-size oysters.
Yes.
That's what was in the plan, and that was scuttled, so.
Well, we knew we
and,
couldn't do it in Little Pond.
Right.
Because it has a limit, they have to be.
No, I know, but that was, I think the proposal had them growing to full-size, and then we adjusted it.
I think that,
No, I
No.
don't think we were ever going to be allowed to go full-size
They-
because it was a closed area.
They were always gonna be relayed to somewhere else.
yeah, and what would be useful at this point would be to get where they're relayed to.
Yes,
Right.
obviously, that's the next
And
step.
we tried to do that this year, but that was not doable.
Really?
Well, that's what we were told. That was in our proposal to you, our scope this year for you
Okay.
guys.
And it's not reasonable to expect that constraint to be lifted, right? Because it's just too dangerous. If you grew them big in this contaminated water, people would poach them and die.
Well, they won't die, but it
Well,
is
they'll get
an
very
attractive
sick.
nuisance.
They could get sick.
And
Yeah.
give oysters a bad name.
Yeah.
Division of Marine Fisheries was gonna let us do it.
Right,
Right.
that was
The
part of
Division of
it.
Marine Fisheries calls it an unattractive nuisance.
Yeah, that's what it
But,
is.
but I mean, it's, as opposed to some regulations that I won't go into, this is a very reasonable one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Of course, the thing is that they, as long as you can take them out and relay them, I think you can get done what you need to get done.
But that's been proven pretty well. We have, Mrs. McDonald, I think. Can't see you back there, but yes. Could
You
speak
have
to
to
a
come
microphone?
and speak into a microphone.
Yeah, we're on national TV, and we want to make sure that everybody hears you.
You'll have to, well,
If I can get any further than that, should be enough.
I can reach halfway.
And turn it on. Yes. Is it on?
I don't know
that sounds like it is. Just speak into it.
what you call upper pond. Is that what we would know as the perch pond?
No,
No, that's in, next pond.
This is
Yeah,
Little
that's
Pond,
We're on Little Pond here.
I thought perch pond was part.
Fish Pond is part of
No, it's
Great.
Great Pond.
Great Pond.
Okay,
So,
and second, application. I think that's salt water and fresh water?
Well, it's salty, really salty water and less salty water.
Brackish.
The salinities are still pretty high, but they're just different by 4 or 5 parts per thousand, which is, density-wise, weight-wise, is a lot of difference.
And is that because the water is coming in, though limited from the ocean?
Well, in part, that's some of the problem with Little Pond is the restriction on the inlet, yes. But the reason why there's a salinity grading is because there's fresh water coming in at the top of Little Pond, it's moving down pond, and we don't have a big tidal exchange at the mouth. But it is the fresh water coming in that it plays a role as well in the stratification.
And so is that a similar situation to Perch Pond, which is kind of a dead pond? because
Perch
there's
Pond's
no-
problem has mainly always been the fact that it's a kettle pond, it was a kettle pond that got caught by sea level rise. And so it's deep. Deepest part of Great Pond is Perch Pond. And so what happens is that it has salt water coming in, or fresh water coming in, mainly groundwater around the top, but it's very deep. And so the salt water that does get in goes to the bottom, and it sits down there, and Perch Pond frequently has no oxygen in the bottom waters. Because it doesn't mix for months and months and even years, used to be years.
It's a terrible smell.
It's the sulfide, yeah.
And then, trying to visualize this stratification, is that on the idea of the Gulf Stream? That there is this kind of separate water body that's traveling through?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's separate in that the top and bottom waters don't mix much, but it's a different reason than the Gulf Stream. It's just the water is moving to the ocean. There is an elevation gradient to move the water through Little Pond and out through the inlet and into the ocean. There's fresh water coming in all the time. You got to get rid of that volume. But it's just the system is not mixing vertically enough because there's not enough tidal movement to mix it, and there's not enough wind to mix it. If there was stronger wind, it would also mix.
Matt?
I just want to ask Brian, this is typically when we have fish kills because
Yeah.
the water becomes inoptimal.
It came from right there. Thank you.
So another question, we knew this going in, that we would have to take them out at 1.5 inches, but we weren't expecting to get the data for nitrogen removal. I mean, when we designed this, how did we miss that point?
Well, I think part of the problem is the DEP said, if you're going to do anything with the shellfish here, we want 3 years of study. And the Concom said, if you're going to do this much shellfish in this pond, we want to make sure nothing bad's happening. And so both of them kind of laid out the parameters of what we had to do to go forward. That's what we did.
So,
Everyone knew
the
it.
way it was designed, we never would get total nitrogen removal from a fair-sized oyster.
Right, yeah, even if they all grew to 5 inches, nobody would have expected total nitrogen removal.
Well, I
So-
think if we had,
so-
if we'd gotten up to big oysters, we would have gotten a number for total nitrogen.
Well, let me just finish my thought here. So how are we going to do that now? I mean, we want to get that number. We're not going to get it the way we're doing, where the study is designed now.
True. Well, this study's over. We've had it out 3 years.
I think you look at the relay sites.
Yeah, the new locations where the stuff
I'm
goes.
just looking at the original plan, and the original plan was to grow them to 60 to 70 millimeters, or about 3 inches.
Mhm.
So, but that was changed because DMF said, no, you have to keep them
Attractive
under
nuisance.
Attractive nuisance, right.
People call
Keep
me that,
below
but
size.
unattractive nuisance.
But it was in the original plan to do that, and it was to, actually, we had 2 seed batches. It was an early spring
Yep.
batch, and then a midsummer batch, and that midsummer batch was to be overwintered and then continued
Okay.
the second year. But it, but it was changed because of the state regulations, so.
But you see, to get the number, you look at your relay sites. You don't have to do all this water column stuff. This water column stuff was because nobody knew anything.
Right.
That's why. And when you don't know anything, then you tend to do this. If we were going to do this again, and we were going to look at it, we could do it with half or a third of the water column sampling. We'd rely a little bit more on some of the automated instruments, which are cheap. And we'd be looking mainly at getting good numbers for different deployment areas for the oyster and looking at the sediments in more detail. And we could get that one number, just to get that one number. That's the only reason. We could get that number a lot cheaper and quicker than this. But when you don't know anything, you have to do this. I'm not throwing rocks at this. I'm just saying that this is the way you start. You take this and then you make this, everybody always wants a simplified protocol. Well, that simplified protocol is shrink down all this water column stuff, do some easy stuff, do focus on the shellfish themselves and on the sediments and the larger relay areas.
And to get to that, we had to do this.
My,
I think so. Yeah.
I just want to continue
Yeah,
my
go ahead, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
line of thought here. So, in order for us to get this number, wouldn't it make sense to do it in a different pond where you don't have to take them out after the
You
inch
have
and
to.
a half?
Absolutely.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
are we doing that? Is that something we plan on doing, or do we have to design that all over again?
Well, Sia's not here, but I think she would say that that's what the pilot in Bourne's Pond is for this year. We're doing a viability study so that we identify the areas where shellfish can be grown. There will be, I think it's 500,000 to be grown in Bourne's Pond, but there would be no limit. They would be able to be grown, and the second year they would be able to be harvested. Once we know the full acreage that we've got to work with in Bourne's Pond, then you could go from start seed to full harvest.
Okay.
And then you would have what I would call a real situation.
Okay,
Our Little
okay.
Pond is artificially constrained by the regulations we had to follow.
Okay. John?
Well, we're certainly going to be able, as we relay things, we can harvest mature oysters and get nitrogen numbers on them. It seems to me one of the things we want to think about is going ahead. Chlorophyll, I mean, my intuition still is that clarification of the water column by filtration is going to be an incredibly important plus for
Yeah.
what we're doing. And so monitoring the chlorophyll levels are going to give us a lot in those relay areas.
Yes.
And unfortunately, what we're not going to have is before we relay things. So if we're starting with this Bourne Pond experiment this year, we
Oh,
don't
that's okay.
have.
Well, we do have befores.
Yeah.
From your work, right?
Because the ponds are monitored for all these parameters. If you flip back to that
Would
original
just be
slide.
where you put these.
These ponds are monitored for those parameters. Speaking of it, the continuous oxygen, which was a requirement of the Concom, that's not something they normally do.
I don't even think it's necessary. I mean,
Exactly. I
could
think we
really
proved that it's
design a
not
very,
necessary.
very simple thing. And you don't even need the small ones growing up through, because fundamentally, we know from all this that you need to get up to bigger oysters. And so
Yes.
you just deal with the relayed ones.
Steve, then Matt?
Is there any already collected data on these sites to which the oysters were transferred?
That would be
I-
West Falmouth,
Yeah.
Green Pond, and we know that the ones in Quistit, those died.
yeah,
But
yeah,
Kristen-
which was,
well, not
yeah.
all of them.
well, you have
But-
his MVP data from
I
the
did too.
original
Yeah.
MVPs.
We have some data, definitely, and the town has it too, on West Falmouth. I don't know if it's the sites, because, that just didn't happen this year for us. And Green Pond, we have done some stuff, but where those oysters were placed is not, they were put down way near the inlet.
They were near
That's
the
a little bit out of our,
Yeah.
that's a different kind of world, because it's so close to the inlet. Nice clean water. And what was the third one? Oh, Quistit, they died.
Right.
So,
But that's part of the data.
Right.
yeah,
I
but
don't
not
care
our
why
data.
they died. It's part of the
We
data.
know they
It
died.
was predation by drills.
Yeah, which is
And
common.
Sia said also some of them were sedimented, they were covered over. I don't
But
know.
Mass DEP doesn't say you get credit, and you still get credit even if your oysters are killed by drills.
No, no, they'll be good, they'll be sure not to.
It's got to be
Yeah,
meat on the
I
hook.
want to make an observation, and with Brian here, I think it's timely. The real problem with nitrogen is the production of chlorophyll. It blocks the sunlight, and stuff doesn't grow on the bottom. You lose your eelgrass and so on and so forth. So what we're really trying to do is remove the chlorophyll from the water. And you do that by putting oysters in. You could also go upstream and take the nitrogen out so it doesn't feed the chlorophyll. But if you're removing the chlorophyll within the stream during a summer, doesn't that get to the problem?
Yeah, we went down the same thought process that you just went through, but then we went to the next step, which was, there's problems measuring chlorophyll by fluorescence in these systems, and so.
Explain that, because I don't.
In other words, the sensors give you a fluorescence number that isn't necessarily just chlorophyll, and so you have a problem. And then we said, well, but still, we're interested in that light thing you said,
Yeah.
the light doesn't penetrate. So we said, why don't we look at light attenuation? So we deployed time series monitors to measure the light attenuation directly. In other words, how much stuff's in the water, how much light's getting
Right.
through it, and then we can calculate attenuation from that, so you can apply it anywhere you want. We could put it as light, just light too. And so we do that. So in other words, we do the chlorophyll, there's some problems with that, but we go directly to the light to see if you could sustain eelgrass. So we jump right and we measure the light changes directly. And that's pretty straightforward and again, easy and cheap.
So
Okay.
you're agreeing with Matt, you're just taking it one step further on the technical details
yeah.
of how you measure it.
I was trying to say that, I always, say we did have it.
We always
that,
agree.
We built on it, right? We went to the next step.
Yeah.
And same thought process.
I mean, in one way, the work I did years ago, we looked at shading as a toxin, because it basically affects the growth, the benthic or the sustainability of the system. So it's.
So, again, I think you had said, Virginia, well, you could go the little ones all the way up in Bourne's Pond, which you can do. But, they may grow a lot faster in Little Pond. And if you could transfer them over, you might be able to cut a year out of if you're actually thinking market.
And that definitely is what Department of Marine and Environmental Sciences is thinking.
Yeah.
That we will use Little Pond as a nursery,
Yeah.
and then they will be relayed to the other ponds where in 1 year they will reach commercial size.
Yep.
And we will also have the maximum effect
Yeah.
in terms of removing chlorophyll and removing nitrogen.
So is there something we should be doing this summer, so we don't lose another year?
I think if you have large ones in, you don't need millions for this type of work. But if you have large ones in, then it would be just to focus down hard on getting your nitrogen removal number
Right.
and not doing all of this other.
And then we're talking $500,000 in Bourne's Pond this summer.
Yeah.
So,
We would knock your water column stations down to like 3. I mean, right there, from 13 to 3.
Yeah.
You're talking about Little Pond.
No, I'm talking about trying to
Any.
measure. If you wanted any water column work, we're doing 13 in Little Pond, we'd say, well, maybe 3's enough.
Don't need that many.
And even if for bottom deployment in Bourne's Pond, if you focus on the sediments, focus on the oysters, focus on the light attenuation if you want, because that's almost free. It's so cheap. And, you're pretty much there,
John?
So there's a secondary problem which this doesn't deal with, and that is even if you clarify the water columns significantly, you still have the macroalgal problem and if you remember when we look at eelgrass beds, what's really destroying them is the macroalgae that are growing on them as epiphytes. And on the bottom of Quoit Bay, we're getting this huge.
Yes.
And so not only do we have to have some oysters helping us clarify the water column, we've got to deal with the nutrients which are allowing that macroalgal growth, both in the eel beds and on the bottoms of places like the Quoit Bay. So it's not as simple as us throwing some oysters around. I mean, this is a complex problem, and it has a number of levels that we're going to have to deal with.
I'm
Amen.
interested to hear what Brian has to say about that.
Macroalgae? Macroalgae are a problem. We typically find them, though, John, after we've already sort of destroyed most of the eelgrass. We've already created an environment that's not suitable for eelgrass. We've cut down on the light, and the macroalgae grow at lower light, right? So that what we're doing is we've actually shifted the ecological balance over to these things, and then they drift too, and they create those huge accumulations. You're right about Waquoit, but Waquoit's been that way for pushing 50 years now. I mean, that was the big thing. Everyone went crazy years ago, but in reality, there'd been a report written by DEQE or something years and years ago. It's a fantastic report, and they had found cladophora and all this stuff, and it was a real eye-opener, the fact that they were worried about it. And then decades later, then we were like, oh, yeah.
There it is again.
They're right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And then the other piece, just saying, this is a complex picture, is the sediments. If you've got a backlog of sediments that are muck, you're still not going to get eelgrass, even if you have clear water.
well, you know, I agree, sort of. I think that the big problem is you got to clarify the water enough to be able to get them to grow. That's the first limitation. The second thing is that you know, I started out, when we started the estuaries project, thinking, you know, I had this vision of what eelgrass sediments look like. We have found eelgrass growing today in the most soupy, disgusting, sulfitic sediments.
Really?
Yeah, some of them in Hammett's Cove is one, in Buzzards Bay, in Farm Pond on the Vineyard. These are horrible places. I mean, they're terrible. But for the most part, you're right. I mean, they need a consolidated sediment. But it can be mud.
It can
Just
be mud.
can't be soup, usually, although we
Okay.
have found exceptions. Who cares about the exception? For the most part, that's right.
Good.
But mud's good.
Okay. So, is this the last slide?
Oh, yeah, that's actually the bottom of a bag, but it did not showing up. And it shows all the biodeposits coming out. But no, the environmental findings are any environmental findings for this thing is really about the biodeposits. And we didn't really find any changes in TN in Little Pond, either before, during, or after, when comparing back to the longer-term record that was averaged in 2006. That isn't just 2000, it's all the record before 2006 up to 2000. We did find hypoxic conditions in the bottom waters and even the surface waters of the pond each year. And we find it all the way back 20, 30 years. So we didn't do it, the oysters didn't do it. In fact, it's not necessarily any worse now than it was then. Might be a little worse overall year to year to year, but in reality, the oysters, where the oysters are, which may be in a different slide, there's some thought that where the oysters are, there might be enough turbulence with those bags that we seem to get a little bit of oxygenation going on. We can't really say it's the oysters, but I mean, it might be the physics of managing an aquaculture thing that mixes stuff up. I don't know, but we just seem to see these little oxygen blips right there. These are continuous records.
Okay.
Who knew? But it certainly didn't get worse. And then we didn't see any real negative effects on the benthic animals, we certainly didn't find any negative effects on water quality, nothing. I mean, it just, you put them out, there was a small patch, and, you know, all the concerns that this would happen, that happened, nothing happened. And like you said, you know, we're still trying to pull out effects, you know. And we did not see the blooms we thought we might see with high ammonia release from the oysters. And then what we have is we have this, we did get a modest or low to modest effect in water quality in those years, 2013 and 14. Obviously not 15 because we didn't have them in long enough. But in 2015, we only had small oysters. They removed after a short time. We didn't see any real effect of anything. 13 and 14, they were in all the way through October. We did see, it says significant oyster deployment years, just mean we built up some biomass we could look at, and we did start to see some stuff. And if you go through the monthly data, you can see it better. We saw improvements in turbidity, meaning it got less turbid. We got more light penetration. We saw lower pigments. We saw slightly lower TN, but it's hard because of the big background of DON. If you look at the individual data, you get better data. Like, just look at PON, for instance. But when you pull them out, things go back up, okay, when they get removed after September, October. And then it just says, the same thing. We saw slightly lower chlorophyll in some samples. We saw higher phaeophytin, which is the first breakdown product of the chlorophyll from the grazing of the oysters. That's typical, but it means that they're doing something. And the decrease in total nitrogen, this is not, remember, this is only 2013 and 14, right? Within the demo site, we did see it right in the site is where we could see, that's the only site you could sort of count on seeing an effect, okay? And so that's, if you go through the data, that's what you look at. Look at the one in the site and upgrade it from the site, okay? 2013-14, we did see lower particulate numbers. And the reason that comes out, not the TN doesn't come out, Steve, is because we're swamped in the TN with this 80% background, but when you go to the PON and POC, you get the straight numbers, no dilution with this other thing. And then each year when we removed the oysters, we saw decreased water clarity for a little bit and increased pigments, only for a short time, because, the general conclusions, it does look like that oysters represent a viable ecological approach, but we don't have the data yet to design the final deployments to actually do it. The critical thing is they alter the nitrogen cycle. We know that. We proved it here. We've looked at it other places. And right now we're sticking to a doubling of the nitrogen removal based on harvest alone, so you get double the bang for the buck. We're seeing that that the big thing is, especially in the harvest and in the sediments, is that the nitrogen removal rates are based also on the site, not just on the oysters. Okay? And that makes life interesting, because now you're getting the secondary effect of what are the sediments like? What's the depositional environment like? We were lucky in Little Pond. There's no real current, so therefore things fell pretty much straight down. Particle biodeposits don't fall straight down. They're spread over a wider area. What does that mean? You're not going to get the same enhanced denitrification. So there's still questions. And as we all know, the numbers and size of oysters and the duration of their deployment are all important to get a measurable effect. Not any one of them. So we could have 10 million 1 millimeter oysters, and who cares,
Just one thing. On this, I think we have to put this in a kind of a scaling context. We used about 0.3 to 0.5 acres total in Little Pond.
Yeah, that's the actual area, yeah.
The actual area versus, we would need like 4 or 5 to really see a significant impact. So to have about 10% of to see a significant impact with the wind and mixing and everything else that's happening with the rain and everything, it may be that it needs to be bigger, because we're like, it's just too big a task to assign or to assume that the very small area would be able to do it, but we need much more.
The major problem with Little Pond as a restoration or oyster restoration project is not just that they were too small. You could increase the acreage, tenfold. It's still not going to do anything. The problem was that also by the time they got big enough, even before you pulled them out, it was getting cold. Things were clearing up anyway. And so you need them to be big in June, July, and August, or May, June, July, whatever you want to say. You can argue about the months, but you get the idea. And you can't put them in June and expect that you're going to see anything. So what happens to us is we're out there and we're measuring the effect after this worst part of the year's over. And so if you did it over and over again, it's just not. But again, you gotta do something to figure out how to do it again, to get more and more refined.
Right.
I have no problem with that.
John?
So it seems to me, in the context of Little Pond, we do not want to think of the oysters as a restoration
I
project.
agree with
Yes.
that.
This is an incubator site.
Yes.
Right.
And that's all it's going to
Yes.
be.
Yep.
So we are, no matter how many little oysters we throw in there.
Agree.
We're never going to have a restoration component to
Right.
it. So it's an incredibly successful incubator site.
Right.
And we ought to keep using it for that and just take
Right.
restoration off the table.
It's a
Yep.
phytoplankton incubator. You got the best food around sitting in that
Yeah,
pond. I
yeah.
mean, you know.
Perfect.
Yeah, on your point, I think that as an incubator, it's great, okay? And especially the way we've been doing it with the relays, because we're putting like almost 1.5, 2-inch animals in the fall.
Yes.
In these other estuaries, and then by the time spring comes, then they take off, okay, and they get very big. They get even up to 4.5 inches very quickly, at least in West Falmouth Harbor and Green Pond. So I think that that is important. But on the other side of that too, from a management standpoint, it's better to actually grow the oysters where they're going to be planted. In other words, if it's a Bourne's Pond project, it might be better to do them in Bourne's Pond, because then you don't have the effort and cost and everything
Of relaying.
trucking them out. You just dump them out of the bags and plant them. So it's a real, it could be a much simpler, it would be a simpler thing.
You have to run the
do that.
economics on, if you could cut a year, get them a year to harvest a year earlier by starting them in Little Pond, then it might be worth it to do that. That's your trade-off. You
We'll
gotta
have to
figure
see
that
how
out.
they do, how they would do in the other estuaries.
Because we went around and we dipped oysters in a bunch of Falmouths, it had to be Falmouth, right? Ponds years ago, and Little Pond, far and above, outstripped everybody for growth, and it was just massive. You know, they were getting up, when you put them in really, really early,
We need more nutrients.
they were coming out as almost marketable size.
Oh, well, hold that thought. Mr. Brown?
Hi, Doug Brown. Do you think there'll ever be a time when Little Pond will be not polluted enough that it could be a permanent location for oysters? Or are there other kind of pollution that are going to remain?
And it wouldn't be a good nursery anymore either.
Well, we don't,
No,
We
I
don't
think
know.
it's the toxic.
But,
There's nothing wrong with Little Pond.
I
It can't
believe
be
it's
fixed.
coliform.
right,
Uh,
you're right.
And I'm presuming that's because of septic systems that sit in the groundwater right next to the pond. So the sewering project would presumably make a change.
Could also be
Some of
from
the-
road
and
runoff.
The road
improvement.
runoff too,
Well,
in a few areas.
sorry,
is
what?
There's direct road runoff in a few
Right.
areas.
Runoff.
as well.
And
Yes.
The ducks as
And
well.
well, yes, but
So-
ducks
But-
eat food.
Yeah, but your point, it's a good point, because it may be that with the sewer project, that the nutrient load that comes in will be reduced, and then the blooms of the coliform will be smaller, and then it might be at least seasonally harvestable.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
But isn't it academic if the sewers are doing the job?
No, if you wanted to raise oysters for deployment in other places in town because, for whatever reason, or if you wanted to.
Yeah, but if you're
you wanted
raising them just to a
polish it-
small size, then you want to put them somewhere else. That doesn't matter.
I
If
think-
Doug was suggesting, let them go to,
Full
is it
size.
possible in the future that it could be an open area, and so you could let them grow to full size?
Mhm.
And I'm saying, maybe, but if the sewers are already doing enough to remove the nitrogen, it's okay, but we don't need it.
Well, the benefit would be to
Yeah,
the
no,
recreational
that's
shellfish,
correct.
then they have a new
Right,
place to go.
sure.
Some people are doing it as what's it called, a safety factor. So they do the sewers, they do all their stuff, and then they throw in shellfish with the idea that that removes something enough to, as a polishing, to get you through permitting, and it's just nice. And the other thing is, you could turn it around and say, if we spend all this money on sewers, wouldn't it be nice if we could shellfish in Little Pond? You could say that too. Right? I mean, we spend all this money.
There's also a lag factor, and we
Yes.
don't know that yet. We don't know how long it will take the existing groundwater, and to the degree it's saturated with septic system, how long for that to clean out, so.
That's right.
Yeah.
But in reality, what will happen is eventually, if Falmouth keeps up the way it's been going, eventually each thing checked off. You get rid of this
Yeah.
big problem that's killing everything, and then the
Yeah.
next, what's next, you know?
Yeah.
What's next, like for New Bedford Harbor, it was PCBs, but now, then it went to nutrients. So they're spending hundreds of millions on nutrients. So getting that down, they're just checking them off until pretty soon it'll be sort of more usable as a resource. Not great, still the PCB, but it'll be much, much, much better. It already is okay for primary contact recreation.
I have a question that's not related to this report, but is related to MEP.
Sure,
We
sure.
ready?
Yeah, you're here and he's here.
Okay,
Let's-
so Brian, can you just educate us? What kind of background monitoring do you do in Vineyard Sound? How many monitoring stations do you
In
have
Vineyard Sound?
in Vineyard Sound? And do you look for the same suite of, that was listed, that you look in the estuaries?
We only have about 3 or 4 stations in Vineyard
Okay.
Sound.
In the Falmouth area, or 3 and 4
No,
for the
it's,
full
we
length?
only have 1 or 2 in Falmouth, and we have one just across at the Vineyard, just across from Falmouth.
Okay.
And we originally had 12, I think, or 15,
Uh-huh.
sound-wise, and then, but we have a bunch, we have some off Nantucket, we
Okay,
have some off the
that's
Vineyard,
just-
and we have some off Falmouth, and in Mashpee, we have some off Mashpee, some off Coit. So
Okay.
you see, we do have that kind of thing, but it's not massive at all.
And so my follow-on question to that is, over the 10 years you've been working on this, or give or take, have you found those, whatever parameters you're looking at,
Right.
to be basically consistent?
Yeah, pretty much.
You haven't seen any particular trends?
Not really.
Okay.
In the center of the sound, although there was a lot of talk about that the sound is getting polluted by the land and all that, that our center of the sound, when we were doing full-scale sound, everything, the whole thing, the entire sound was sampled, synoptically, bang, done. And when we did that for 3 or 4 years, a couple of years ago, it really was very high quality. I mean, it was super high
High
quality.
quality.
Yeah, I mean, it had great light penetration. There were areas off Hyannis, off Lewis Bay, had a little bit of trouble in some places, because I think mainly it's ferries going in and out we would catch.
Yeah.
But it was, the sound's in great shape.
Okay.
The coalition has also established some year-round stations
In the sound?
in the sound.
Oh,
In
really?
Nantucket Sound?
That's unusual, interesting.
Really? I thought they were only interested in Buzzards Bay.
about Nobsco Point.
Oh, they're thinking about
That's
Nobsco Point.
interesting. They're kind of out of their jurisdiction a little.
But Providence Sound Center also, I think, has a few stations as
Okay.
part of this county money in Nantucket Sound. I don't know how far they go down to Vineyard Sound, though. Yeah.
Hey, Ron.
I was just wondering, this has been a great 3-year program, very intensive. You looked at amazing things from benthic flora to transparent light to nutrients to pH, dissolved, everything. And now we also have in parallel going on in all the other estuaries, the pond washers program that you're also involved in. Is it possible to, let's say that if we, as we start moving ahead and analyzing these different sites for various interventions, even Little Pond with sewering, is the pond watcher's level of analysis enough to give us enough of an indication? In other words, can we pare this massive program back to a much more cost-effective approach to getting it, an outcome or an understanding?
If we had Pond Watch going at just its low level now, and you guys were already talking about that, and we can expand it a little bit if we wanted to, we could talk about that, like Salt Pond and Falmouth Harbor, nobody's doing those right now. But a few little things. We are doing with Coit, we are doing with Mashpee, and we are doing Pompasset Bay. And when I say with Coit, I don't mean with Coit Bay, I mean also Eel River, that whole thing. So it's a big system. And then it extends all the way over through Pond Watch, all the way to, I'd like to say, well, there's Oyster Pond at one end, but then there's the 2, Salt Pond and Falmouth Harbor. We get the whole south coast, and we add those 2. And at that level, Pond Watch level, sampling is fine. It's fine for compliance sampling if you add at multi-year level, meaning only every 3 or every 5 years, the eelgrass monitoring, which the state is still doing, so you don't have to pay that. And in fauna every 5 years or something like that. But that's easy. And What we've said is also that if towns really spend a lot of money on something and they think they've restored it and it's not showing up because there's no eelgrass back, that we have a bioassay to use for that, to let you know if it could support eelgrass. So that, and it's easy, and so you just put it in. It's used also by now, I'd like to say DMF, but it's probably DEP is using it up in Boston Harbor, because they're thinking that eelgrass should be back, but it's not coming
Good.
back.
Good, because we've been sort of threatened with the idea that after you do all this expensive stuff, if there's no eelgrass, you gotta do more expensive stuff, and we don't like that theory.
Right, no, I'm totally with you.
I'm just wondering, could you add that as sort of a part of your report, kind of a swan song at the end, saying like, looking forward, based on all of the analyses that we've done, that the Pond Washers program with, benthic fauna or in-fauna studies and something periodically would
Thanks for coming.
would give us the information we need to understand what the interventions are doing.
If the committee, it's what the committee wants, I mean, I can add or not add, whatever you want, just send me an email.
I guess that's what the point we're at now, which is, if anybody has any comments, additions, or corrections, we should send them to you for.
Yeah, well, if you could compile them, would be helpful.
Okay,
Somebody
well, send them to
compiles,
Sia.
Because
She'll-
because
she'll-
then I get it all, and I
Right.
know that's it, and I
Okay,
haven't missed something.
Send them to Sia, she'll bring them back at the next meeting. Well, I guess we need to vote to accept this.
Sure.
But that probably has to happen first, so. yeah.
Okay.
Any comments? Send
And
them.
I would like you to consider, though, if you go forward to larger oysters, giving us a call, because we're
Oh, yeah.
now doing 6 towns or something like that, and the state has contacted us and wants us to also start trying to,
Mhm.
because nobody has enough data to do it all, to get all that variability captured, so the point is you join in and then everybody throws something in the pot and then everybody gets to eat the stew.
Well, we've got a couple million oysters in West Falmouth Harbor and Green Pond right now.
Yeah.
They're gonna start growing this summer, they should just about be, well, not yet, it's been so cold, but they'll start growing at some point soon. So that they're out there, and they're like 1.5 to 2 inches, or 1.5 inches anyway, that are, 1 million in each place.
All right, any more questions or comments for Dr. Howes? If not, we thank you very much, and this could be a short meeting if we do this right.
Oh, it's already
Well,
been a
do
very
we want to
interesting-
vote to accept the draft, or do you want to have a period between now and our next?
Well, it sounded like there were going to be some comments, and if there were, we
No.
really should wait till they
All
get.
right,
And you'll be happy to know that Sia reviewed it before you got it, and we made
Good.
changes
Okay.
for her,
okay.
so that you get something that you've already said.
I like the report, and it was my sense that most of the members of the committee think it's totally adequate. But if there was some substantive addition, such as what, albeit small, that Ron mentioned, we should agree now whether we want SEA to allow that into it.
Fair enough. Okay, and to be fair, we could do a vote tonight, so if somebody will put a motion out to accept it as it is, and then we could take an amendment,
So moved.
I'll second.
okay? It's been moved and seconded to accept the report as presented. Is there any discussion?
No, the only thing is if we wanted to make a recommendation on additional,
If you have additional language, that would be an amendment, so. if
well,
you're
I don't
offering us an
have the
amendment, we'd have to have
the
it.
exact language right now. Well, I would say just
It was something about the additional bioassays. It was one.
Right, basically, going forward.
Is there some reason we don't want that in there?
Well, I don't know what that is exactly, but go.
Brian was-
It's like pond watchers and the in-fauna study and
I
and
mean,
the eelgrass
you could
study.
also
It
just
doesn't
request that I put
Yeah.
together a tech memo for you just on
To
that.
me, that sounds more like a cover letter or a comment. It's just,
Yeah, it's not exactly.
it's
a
not
science.
Little Pond.
It's
You know,
not
we
a-
can do,
it-
if we continue our discussions on Pond Watch over the next period of time,
So
we
you
might
don't
be
need,
able to put it
you don't need that to be in the report particularly.
in detail, rather than just a few sentences.
Well, you're not helping, because we need to either have a few sentences or not.
I want to get out of here, so I'm going to go over
Stay,
here
don't
now.
go away, we might fix this today. but- Okay, do we have language, or do we want to trust him to put it in the cover letter? What's your pleasure? This is coming from you, Ron, so.
No, I'm just saying that it would be nice that as a concluding, kind of a, looking forward and saying like, based on all the work we've done, It's been very instructive, and we could do a pared down, analysis of key indicators. In other words, coming out from the whole range of indicators.
Okay.
What the key ones would be, so that the cost would be much less.
So
and
you
we
think
get
that
good
would be a
result.
conclusion that ought to be in the report? Is that a conclusion that you would be happy to have in the report?
Try.
Well,
Yeah,
It's okay.
You agree with it?
To see how it fits in.
Okay.
okay, that's
So
fine with me.
that's the motion, I
That's
take it.
fine, yeah. Just, I would leave it
Okay.
to Brian then as to consider it and to
Just
phrase
a little
it.
bit more what the
because-
thought is, and we'll see what.
Okay.
Rather than have it being
All right.
adopted by this group at this time, you want?
Right.
Okay, good.
Right,
Okay, so
right.
the motion's withdrawn. We're taking the vote now on accepting
The draft.
the draft. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Got it.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And know that Falmouth is still out in front on this.
Make sure the
All right.
reporter hears that. He was
You catch that?
very good.
And you have all of your electronics.
I think I do, and I ended
Okay.
up using your.
Whose laptop?
That's the town.
The town's? Oh, good.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks, Brian.
Did you take any of our electronics with you?
Thank you, Brian.
Jersey.
So are you.
Well, since 5/7 of the committee was at town meeting the whole time, the town meeting report will be very brief. There were 4 articles that this committee made recommendations to the selectmen on. Article 13 in the special, that we recommended in favor of it, and the town meeting so voted. Article 14 in the special, we recommended in favor, and the town meeting so voted. Article 7 in the annual, we recommended favorably, and the town meeting so voted. And Article 26, we recommended against it, and the town meeting so voted. Any discussion? Okay, report of members and staff.
I have a few things which will be very quick. The U.S. Geological Survey has begun installing wells in Mara Vista to look at the existing groundwater regime. They're going to have what we call fences, which they're going from the one border to the other border with 4 wells, and then they're moving down several streets and 4 more wells, and then down several streets and 4 more wells. So that has just begun. They've installed one of those fences already, and the only thing I know is that they did not encounter any problems with the soils. It was easy drilling.
Do you know what kind of wells they put in? Are they open screens or multi-level?
I don't
Okay.
know that.
What's the purpose?
The purpose ultimately is both water quality and to define the water table. So it's for us to have a picture exactly of what the direction of groundwater flow is from coast to coast, basically, in the Mara Vista Peninsula.
Why is Mara Vista one we've already gone through?
Well,
The
this,
microphone, right? Yeah.
So I'm curious, why were you modeling the water flow when we've just put sewers in there?
this is the before. They want to see what the nitrogen content is. We don't have any data of the nitrogen content in the groundwater in Mara Vista. So they want to see it before the sewers get turned on. And as I mentioned a little earlier about the lag time, once the sewers start collecting all of the nitrogen, there still will be nitrogen in the groundwater, and there's a question of how long it will take for that to flush out. And so
Okay.
this study will tell us that.
Thank you.
That's my first report. The second is the permeable reactive barriers. Drilling on the Shorewood parcel will begin on Monday, and they are putting in 2 additional clusters of wells and several water table wells. And then that will conclude the grant in terms of installation of measuring, of monitoring wells. Then they're going to sample twice, and we'll get a report in July. And
Any other reports? Comments? Okay. Minutes of the prior meeting. Everybody got them sent out a few days ago. Everybody had a chance to look at them. Can we have a motion to adopt them, and let's see if anybody has any changes?
So moved.
Moved and
Second.
seconded to adopt them as presented. Any additions or corrections or amendments to be proposed? No? Okay, all in favor of adopting them as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Wait, I have to abstain because I wasn't here.
You went, oh, fair enough.
Okay.
Mrs. Dweig was not here and will abstain. Meeting schedule. I'm sort of thinking school vacation week is not a good time, so April 28th might be better if that's okay with everybody here. And then May 5th and May 18th would be our normal first and third.
May 5th and May 19th.
Could I just ask?
You're right.
Oh, I'm just wondering, I mean, the dates are fine. I'm just wondering, what do we have coming up that's kind of, not just the dates, but in terms of the work we're doing? What are the main topics that we'll be looking at, like at the end of this month and into next?
Well.
It's hard to know now.
Well, we are having a speaker come in to talk about
Right, eelgrass.
Oh, okay.
So continuing our broad education, number one.
Mhm.
Second, I don't know this for sure, but I've just become aware that part of the 208 planning is that there is at least a preliminary plan that has to be filed on every one of our watersheds, so that's 15 plans, with a deadline of June 30th. And the Cape Cod Commission has prepared sort of, they called it bookends, standard scenarios. If it needs sewers, it's got all sewers, and if you do it with alternatives, it's all alternatives. So I think this committee is probably going to at least want to look at these before they get filed. And so that may take a couple of meetings for us to do that.
Who's preparing them?
The Cape Cod Commission.
Oh, they're preparing. Oh,
There,
okay.
yes, so, now they tell me that this is very general. It's hard to, as I said, I just sort of learned about this week. So that's something that I think we may have to look at.
Right. We have, as we all know, gone through estuary by estuary and completed our own circuit of our own estuaries with our own analysis. So we have a good base of knowledge about each estuary already. So it would
Right.
be interesting to see what, if anything, their material adds to that, if anything.
Or
So have they started yet?
They have done the basic work, size of watershed, amount of nitrogen, amount of septic flow, what ponds are affected, what's the TMDL if it's been set. So they've got sort of a checklist of things. You might call it the basic information about each watershed. But then the rest of this template that they're talking about goes into various kinds of scenarios, and they have what they call the traditional scenario, which involves sewers, and the non-traditional scenario. So these are hypothetical.
So if they're doing in 6 months, for the whole, all of Cape Cod,
Yep.
what it's taken us years to do, either we're wasteful or incompetent, or they're very vague.
Right.
Okay.
And I have not seen an example yet. As I said, I just know that this is being developed.
well,
Designing a model is one thing. Dealing in real life with a real estuary is another thing.
no, but they have this huge database, right? And they have this model that you can plug things in. You can say, put
Exactly.
in X, Y, and Z, and you come up with something. So
Exactly.
it just depends on looking at it from a cost perspective and trying to work with minimizing that aspect, see wherever it leads to.
And their material is so loaded with assumptions that have not been tested in
Was
real
it
life.
30,000 feet, or what is that?
Well,
Or are they using?
As you can see from the discussion, I think we need to know more.
Yeah, okay.
And we need to see what these documents look like.
Right.
So,
Absolutely. Also simply from the standpoint of managing public expectations in
Yes.
Falmouth when they all read it.
right.
And it has diametrically opposed to what we're proposing, one or more estuaries.
Right.
Well, I think we hope to inform their model to the point where that doesn't happen.
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention earlier. What was the,
Part of the 208 agreement of things that must be done between the Cape Cod Commission and Department of Environmental Protection is that there shall be a watershed plan or set of scenarios. It's a set of scenarios for each watershed, and Falmouth has more than anybody else, so we have pretty high workload. And there's a deadline of June 30th to file these scenarios.
Do you know, Virginia, when they will be available for us to critique?
Well, I've asked for a sample this week, I haven't gotten it yet.
Yeah, they're not as far ahead as you think.
June 29th.
No, I'm informing the committee of something we might have to do.
Well, what we have to do is produce a plan for the South Coast watersheds by 2019. And that's the track we're on, and if their material proves helpful in that goal, we'll be happy to be helped. Are these dates good for people, 4/28, 5/5, and 5/19? Okay.
Yeah.
Right, any other reports or anything else? We can go home early. All in favor of Matt's motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We got it, thank you.
Thank you.